So you probably saw that Galaxy Z Flip video. Someone got their first hands-on look on it, and I know I've bashed foldables in the past, but honestly, I think this is one of the best implementations of a foldable I've ever seen. And unlike traditional videos, I want to be fair, okay? This time, I'm gonna weigh out all of the pros and, you know, a little bit of the criticism, some of the negatives you might have with this foldable, but try to be overall balanced. So let's start with the pros. Wow, it folds! It flips just like an old flip phone used to. That's so futuristic. That's cool. Okay, I think we're caught up on the pros. Now for the negatives. Let's begin. So I'm only mostly joking in that intro there. I do think this is one of the best foldable implementations we've seen yet, but in my opinion, that's not saying much. It's kind of like giving a award to a sloth for being the fastest sloth on Earth. It's not saying much, you know, because I thought the Galaxy Fold was a heavily rushed, unfinished idea that they just ran out into the market and didn't really think about whether or not they needed to test these things or whether or not the use cases need to be very practical. And with the Motorola Razr, which is actually delivering to people now, we're finding it's incredibly fragile. In fact, you can tear the display off the phone with your fingernail, which foldables and fingernails appear to not go together very well. Also, the specs of that Motorola Razr are not great at all, but that's why I do crown this upcoming Galaxy Z Flip as probably the best one out there, because the specs aren't amazing, they're decent, but a Snapdragon 855, a dual camera on the back, fairly okay pixel density, and it's rumored to start at around $1,400. I mean, hey, that's a lot less than the last Galaxy Fold, and the bezels on it are not, you know, obnoxiously huge, which I also appreciate. The fact that they look pretty thin, they look pretty consistent, and there's just a camera hole instead of, you know, the Galaxy Fold, which had biggest forehead and chin ever on the outside, and then giant asymmetrical notch on the inside. This combats that a little bit better, so credit where credit is due. But again, I've seen a lot of people talk about this thing, and I'm still trying to figure out what the great advantage is, okay? While the Galaxy Fold had a lot of difficulty with its rollout, I could at least understand the practicality of it. The whole use case argument was that you could take a tablet-sized screen and fit it into your pocket. With this, you don't have that argument anymore. Now you're just saying that, well, it's a normal smartphone that happens to fold. What does that fold allow you to do? I still can't figure it out. I don't follow the argument that it makes it more spacious in your pocket because the weight of the phone doesn't change, and honestly, the person in this video unfolding it doesn't look terribly comfortable. In fact, it looks kind of like an extra middle step we don't have to do with our phones now, where we can just pull them out of our pocket, Face ID unlocks, and we swipe up or check notifications or do what we need to do. Now it feels like there's this extra step of having to flip open the fold, and from this video it appears there's not really a button quick release that just opens it. You kind of have to pry it open with your thumbnail, which, again, the nail thing has me concerned. I don't care about what type of foldable glass you're using in this thing. I just feel like from a practical standpoint, how is this necessarily better? I can't follow. It goes along with my consistent issue with foldables, which are about 2 steps forward and 12 steps back. Advantage, okay, it folds up, so I guess in your pocket it makes a little bit less space, but it's gonna be thicker now, and it's gonna take up a big amount of weight in there, so that doesn't change. But the advantage is it folds. And because my wife is much more open-minded than I am, I was curious of her reaction, so I showed her the video of the Galaxy Z Flip, and she actually owned a Razr flip phone. I never did. My first phone was an iPhone 5. I never owned a flip phone in my life. Maybe that's why I have a hard time getting behind this, is because I don't have some nostalgic past that relates back to the flip phone days. They always just looked like cheap, plasticky, unnecessary devices, because when I was growing up, we all had, you know, decent iPod touches or smartphones, even when I was very young. So I showed it to my wife anyway. I was like, hey, look at this smartphone. What do you think? And her immediate reaction was, it looks way too tall, which once she brought that up, I started agreeing with her. This display is an incredibly wide aspect ratio to the point that it looks like with the person holding it, it would be very uncomfortable to try to reach things at the top of the screen. One-handed use, I feel like, isn't going to be very easy. I know Samsung has some one-handed use features, which I feel like you might have to use all the time, but in my opinion, it's just a little too tall for my liking. It looks uncomfortable to hold, and that awkward middle step of having to open it up every time you want to unlock the phone doesn't seem useful. But again, the whole counter argument is I've bickered with a lot of people about this device and the whole idea of a clamshell foldable, because a lot of people like it, a lot of people don't. It's just, why is this helpful? What is it doing? And everyone's response is always just, it folds, and that's the cool part about it. It folds, and maybe that's why it's just such a frustrating topic to me, is because I don't know how many other ways to tell you that having a device that simply folds and that's all it can do is not necessarily a good thing, especially when it comes with a billion sacrifices in durability and makes the phone way more expensive. You could get a pretty nice Samsung phone that's not a foldable for $1,400, and it will actually, you know, take a drop or last in water for a little bit longer than a couple seconds. I have my doubts about the durability of the Z Flip, and I really don't think you guys can find that unreasonable. When Samsung was shipping out these review units and they were about to start delivering to customers, and within 24 hours they started just falling apart and breaking, and Jerry Rig Everything is showing how you can scratch this display permanently with your fingernails. So Samsung's putting instructions in the box that say try not to touch the screen with your fingernails. I feel like it's not unreasonable to assume that we could have those issues with this. I hope they've fixed them. I'm hoping they tried to combat that and tried to do something different with this generation, but given how Motorola's doing it for $1,400, I again still have my doubts. So once people actually get their hands on these things, we'll know for sure. But the rollout of foldables still does not seem too great to me, and I think the common misconception people get is that any type of new technology is instantly the future. It's just a matter of time. Not true. That's not the case. In fact, the only new technologies that end up being the future are the ones that I think tons of people are buying into, and when there's a large consumer demand for it. Maybe in time, if they figure out a way to make foldables more practical, that can happen, but at this point, with smartphone sales heavily leaning more towards things like the iPhone 11 or cheaper, more mid-range phones, because what people need them for these days are just social media, contacting other people, watching some videos, and not breaking the bank account. Those are the phones selling really well right now. I don't think you're gonna get a bunch of people stretching their budget just because it folds. It may seem like a great big deal in the tech community, but if YouTube has taught us anything, it's that the tech community does not reflect the average consumer very well at all. And there's been lots of new technology that we thought would be the future of smartphones but ended up not being a thing at all, like the Galaxy Curve or the Galaxy Beam. And Samsung is known for trying all these type of side projects that may or may not take off, but hey, at least we tried it, because maybe it will be the future and then we can say we pioneered it. But hey, if it doesn't end up being the future, hopefully no one will remember we tried. And that's kind of how I see foldables right now. I think they're going to be kind of a small piece of the market, and they're going to be beloved by the tech community for a while, but then in time, eventually they're going to realize there's not enough consumer demand for it. It's not worth keeping up the R&D and the marketing, and they'll just keep selling their flagships alongside, and those are probably always going to sell better. That's my prediction. Could be totally wrong, but oh, the last thing that really bothers me about the Z Flip is why the letter Z? You know, if they were making a foldable that like had 2 hinges in it and was like a regular phone and then unfolded 3 ways into a tablet, you can call that the Z Flip. You know, that makes a bit more sense, but this phone doesn't make a Z. Call it the V Flip, right? That would make way more sense. I don't get why they call it that, but anyway, let me know what you guys think of the Galaxy Z Flip by hitting me up over on Twitter, joining our Discord, and you can tell me again, but it folds, so it's okay. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.